about, like, what's the difference between surface area and volume? So if I were to hold up the Kleenex box here,
Surface area is outside.
surface area is outside. So what do you mean in terms of the Kleenex box? What's the surface area?
Outside.
Like, be more specific.
Cardboard.
The cardboard, the box itself, that's surface area. What's volume? The tissues on the inside. It's the amount of Kleenex that you can put inside something, okay? So it's kind of like the difference between perimeter and area, okay? In terms of, now we're talking about surface area is the outside, and then the volume is everything on the inside, okay? All right, so I've got a, very simple concept here, okay? I've got a stack of note cards, okay? Our objective is to basically find the area of one note card. And then if I want volume, okay, because the one note card represents the amount of space that the bottom takes up, all I have to do is multiply it by the number of note cards. And essentially that's volume. So our objective, to make it very simple, is to find the area of the base of whatever our prism is. Whether that base is a triangle, a rectangle, a square, a pentagon, whatever it is. And then just multiply it by its height, okay? Now, something that's gonna show up later. If I make it slanted, like this, okay? All right, which we're gonna call oblique. Does the volume change? Mary says no. Why not? So would an oblique prism have the same volume as a right prism? Let me ask you this question, since I'm basically saying volume is the number of note cards. Has the number of note cards changed since I slanted the note cards versus stacked them straight up and down? No. So the volume will not change. Okay, so just to understand that, and we're going to talk about that when we get to it. Okay? All right, so the very first thing here in terms of the postulates, if two polyhedra are congruent, then what? Tell me something about their volumes. The volumes are the same. Oops. Okay? The volumes are the same. Okay? So if I had two stacks of note cards with the same size note cards, the same amount of note cards, the volumes would be the same. They would take up the same amount of space. Okay? All right. So concept. How do you find volume? And let's start with something simple, like a rectangular prism. What have you learned? So I got a rectangular prism here. How do you find the volume? Yeah.
Is it base times height times length?
Okay. Base times height times length. Anybody else? Length times width times height. Anybody else? So essentially, same thing. You're just using different words. Like you're saying length, he's saying base, width times height. Okay. So if I have a shape here, like you see, okay, in terms of it's not something that is consistent throughout, okay, how would we find the volume? Think in terms of like the area questions that were similar to this. Javier? So cut it horizontally or cut it vertically? All right, so he says to cut it this way and cut it this way, and then what would you do? Okay? All right, so let's start with this. What's this length right here? 1, okay? How deep is it? Or what's its width? 2, okay? And then you've got its height is 2 or length is 2, okay? All right, over here, if we need 3 numbers, okay? You need your length times width times height. What's 1 times 2 times 2? 4. Okay, so I need 3 numbers over here. I got a 1. What's this length? 2. How tall is it? 1. What's 1 times 2 times 1? 2. So the volume here is 2. Okay? How tall is the bottom one? 1. It is 7 units long. So how deep is it? 2. So what's 1 times 7 times 2? 14. What is the volume of the whole thing? 20. 4 plus 14 plus 2. Okay? All we did was find the volume of the individual parts and add them together. Okay? Questions there? Yeah.
We have to say units cubed.
And then, correct, it would be, volume would be 20 units cubed for volume. So remember, circumference and perimeter is just units, okay? For area, it's always squared, and then for volume, it's cubed. Okay? All right, so volume for prisms and cylinders, okay? You probably just want to put this directly onto your formula sheet, and then that way you don't have to write it down twice, okay? So on your formula sheet right here, okay, it says that it's exactly the same, all right? I am going to actually give you a separate one for the cylinder just to make it a little bit easier, okay? All right, so starting with a prism. Like I said with the note card, volume is simply the area of the base, capital B, times the height. Now, this is a universal formula. Okay, it works no matter what type of prism it is. For rectangular ones only. Okay, so for rectangular prisms, like we did above, you can do length times width times height. But that only works for rectangular ones. Okay? So if you wanted a separate one specifically for those. All right? So in terms of your formula sheet, okay, a picture, if you want a picture to go with it, all right, we can draw a prism, and we can just draw a rectangular one if you want, okay? Remember that capital B stands for the area of the base, and then H is the height. Okay, definitions. B is the area of the base. H is the height. All right, so putting this into play, okay, one of the first things I have you do, okay, is name the solid. And the reason I want you to be able to name it is I need you to be able to tell me what shape the base is. So what type of solid is that? Trapezoidal prism, trapezoid prism. Yes, everyone sees that the base is a trapezoid? There are two trapezoids and they're parallel to each other. All right, so when we say that volume is equal to base times height, B means you have to find the area of the trapezoid. Okay? And then what's the height? Not 3. 5. Because remember, 5 is the distance between the two trapezoids. Remember, when we talk about height, we're not talking about the height of the trapezoid. We're talking about the height of the prism. Okay? All right? All right, so with the people at your table, see if you can find the volume. First, make sure that you agree on the area of the trapezoid. Number 1, this is base 1. This is base 2, which is 6. This is the height of the trapezoid, so you're doing 6 plus 14 times 3 divided by 2, which gives you 30. And then 30 times 5 gives you 150 centimeters cubed. Okay? So remember, 3 is the height of the trapezoid, 5 is the height of the prism. All right? Questions there? So it's a very basic formula. Find the area of the base, multiply it by the height. You just have to, number 1, recognize what shape the base is and how to find it. And then number 2, you got to recognize the height. All right, so In terms of this one, and don't write this down just yet, volume is still the area of the base times the height. But what shape is the base? Circle, not a sphere. Sphere is three-dimensional, circles are two, okay? So if it's a circle, how do you find the area of a circle? What is it? Pi r squared. So all we're going to do, and this is what you can write down on your formula sheet, instead of saying b times h, we're going to say pi r squared h. That's your volume formula for a cylinder. Pi r squared h. Okay? In terms of if you want a picture for your formula sheet, okay, just draw an example of a cylinder. Okay, label your r, label your h. Remember, those are the only two things that you need. And we're going to leave our answers as exact, as in we're going to leave them in terms of pi. If you need definitions, you should already have them somewhere else on your sheet, but if you want them, R stands for radius, H stands for height. Okay? All right, so up here, if volume is equal to pi r squared h, what's the radius? 9. So square the 9. What's the height?
6.
Okay. So what's 9 squared times 6?
54. Wait.
I got a 486 over here. 486. You should end up with 81 times 6. So 81 times 6 is 486, you said? 86 pi, and that'd be feet cubed. Okay? Questions on that? Okay? All right? So what I'd like you to do is try example 3 with the people at your table. Reminder here, the volume of a cube. Cube. What's a cube? It's what type of prism? Square prism. Okay? Now, what is true about the length, the width, and the height in a cube? They're all the same. So see if you can, with the people at your table, figure out what the length, the width, and the height are, given the volume. See if you can do that. If you understand, okay, that if this is x, and this is x, and this is x, and volume is x cubed is equal to 384, he's basically taking the cube root of both sides. That's what I was trying to get you guys to understand from the other example. So if you took the cube root of 64, you get 4. So all we have to do is take the cube root of 384. What's the cube root of 384?
What is a cube root?
Cubed root?
Yeah, what is that?
Okay, a cubed root is a number that you would multiply by 3 times.
Is it different than the square root?
It's similar. Okay?
Oh my god.
So let's start with this. What did you get for your answer?
58, I think.
58?
Yeah.
Try again. 7.2? 7.2. That sounds a little bit better. Okay? So then example 4. It wants us to calculate the volume of the solid. All right. So the reason for this one is that you are actually going to find the volume twice. And we've done a bunch of these in our area questions. Okay? Here is what you have to understand. You have a triangular prism, but kind of like a donut, they took out the middle. So what do you got to do? Subtract it. So what we're going to do is we're going to find the volume of the triangular prism, and we are going to subtract off the volume of the square prism. Okay? So if we're going to do that, I need the area of the triangular prism. And the big thing that you're supposed to notice here is double tick, double tick, double tick. What type of triangle is it? Regular or equilateral. Okay, so how do you find the volume of that triangle? We have done this a bunch of times. What?
The volume?
Well, remember, in order to find the volume, we have to first find the area of the triangle so that we can then multiply it by its height. Because remember, what we're going to do is we're going to do base times height and subtract base times height. What is it?
Make it a 30, 60, 90.
All right, so Charlie says to first make this into a 30, 60, 90. All right, so what is the height of the triangle?
5√3.
5√3 is correct. Because remember, this would be 5 and then this would be 10. All right, so how do you find the area of this triangle, which is going to represent our capital B? 5√3 for the height times the base, which is 10 divided by 2. All right, so what does that end up being in terms of root 3's? How many root 3's is that? 25, because 50√3 divided by 2 is 25√3. Okay, so now we've got the area of the base is 25√3. What's the height of the triangular prism? What's the distance between the two triangles? 6. 6 is your height. Okay, so we're going to multiply that by 6. Okay, what's 6 times 25? 150. So now we have 150√3. Okay, now what we have to do is we have to find the volume of the square prism. Okay, so let's start with this. What's the area of the square, which is our capital B? Notice that they told us what each side length in the square was. What's the area of the square? 9. 3 times 3 is 9. So the area of the base is 9. What's the height of the square prism? 6, because it's the same as the triangular one. The depth is the same. All right, so what's 9 times 6?
54.
So now all we do is subtract off 54. Are these like terms? Can we combine them together? No. Okay, and so that we're done. That's our volume. Okay, and again, it'd be like feet cubed. Okay? Questions there? We're going to skip example number 5. All right, so one more, last one. Let's go down to the one down in the corner. Okay? This is what I meant by an oblique one. Okay? Remember that oblique ones are going to be equal to whether or not it was going straight up and down. It's like the note cards. All they did was they just slanted them. Well, it's the same as if it was straight up and down. So find the volume. Okay? Okay? You're doing the area of the triangle, which is 9 times 5 divided by 2, and then multiplying by the height of the prism, and that's 8. So you should have ended up with 22.5 for the area of the triangle. 8 is the height of the prism. Gives you 180 meters cubed. All right? Questions?